Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nick Reed. Tomorrow, we're going to have the Friday Road Show. That's right. We will be live at Scramblers. We're going to have a lot of folks showing up. It's going to be our Heroes Breakfast for veterans. If you're a veteran, you're going to get free breakfast, air services, heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical. Delta Roofing and Serenity Honors, along with Scramblers, providing free breakfast for veterans tomorrow morning. The broadcast itself on Fridays out at Scramblers is sponsored by Custom Shade Window Tinting, powered by 3M Window Film. And so hopefully we'll see you out there tomorrow. We do have just a few days left for you to sign up for The Great Escape July 1st. That is the deadline. All the details at ksgf.com. We'll be broadcasting live from the incredibly beautiful, all-inclusive Rio Palace Resort in Costa Mujeres, Mexico, north of Cancun by about 45 miles. So it's a little more isolated than the hustle and bustle of Cancun. Beautiful, white sandy beaches. And, of course, we do the show live, and the cost covers everything, including airfare. Chartered flight, direct, no going to here first, then there first, losing your luggage, having to catch one flight. You had a delay in one, and what does that mean for the other? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We've made it as streamlined as possible. But July 1st is the deadline to get signed up for that. The debate, of course, taking place tonight, and probably the best part about the debate taking place tonight is that we can stop listening to it being talked about ad nauseum. It's the nature of things. There is a great deal of anticipation, much different anticipation with this particular debate than those in the past. Really, what it boils down to is, you got one guy, Biden. Is he going to fall apart? Is he going to? So it's a weird thing because everyone knows that he's not right. Everyone knows that. It's just a matter of, is it going to be on full display? Or are we going to be able to pretend? And by pretend, I mean the establishment, the people that keep talking about how bright he is, how he's the sharpest world leader that exists, that whenever world leaders are together, he's the one that they all have their eyes on. And that could very well be, not for the reasons that they would like to think that they're telling us necessarily, but it's this WWE style performance, and so everyone knows. Really, it's somewhat of an absurd thing that we're even waiting to see, because it's not as if he's able to pull it off for whatever reason, whether they pump him with something or he just happens to, as people in his situation oftentimes do, have moments of clarity where they can push through, and you think, oh wow, they seem fine. I mean, anyone who's been close to someone who suffers from the same sort of mental issues that he is, cognitive issues, they understand that. If you've never been around someone or had a loved one that has declined in the way that he has, you may not realize that. And so those people might be susceptible, of course, to thinking, oh, well, he seems okay, I guess he is. No, that's not the way it works. Then you have the Trump side, and it's just about self-discipline. I mean, that's what people who are pulling for Trump are talking about the most. If he just doesn't harm himself, he has the ability. Will he have the discipline? Whereas Biden doesn't have the ability. It comes in or out. What is Trump going to allow Biden to get in his own way, or is Trump going to do it? So this is what much of it boils down to. And then, of course, the media. Trump is going to probably be debating the media more than anyone. What I suspect is going to occur here is not so much the intent or to go in and be combative with Trump, but to set the narrative. So asking questions about January 6th, in the past, Trump, you have said that you would, you referred to some of the January 6th prisoners who have been found guilty, of course, in a court of law. You've called them political prisoners. And so trying to further tie Trump into talking about January 6th. Everyone has their own assessment of how he should address it. I think the best way is to say, hey, listen, my one concern is making sure every one of those people is treated just like everybody else in this country. If you're a pro-abortion protester, if you were protesting against Supreme Court justices or outside their homes, I just believe that we need to make sure as a country everyone's treated equally. That's it. And yeah, if I'm president, I'm going to make sure that happens. Boom. That's it. Because I think most Americans agree with that, other than your extreme left wing, and they're not going to vote for Trump anyhow. CNN debate moderators, further exposure. They were a little more involved in conspiring with the deep state on the letter from the 51 intelligence folks that, the laptop thing that we're all fully aware of at this point. Well, it appears that Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, they were much more heavily involved in disseminating that disinformation campaign. Of course, they are going to be moderating the debate. And this, I can't believe they're doing this again. Right before the debate, 16 Nobel Prize winners, signed a letter decrying Trump's economic policies, saying that by far Joe Biden's economic policies are better than Trump. We're really going to trot out right before a debate a letter signed by experts in their field claiming that Donald Trump is a danger and that it's the 51 CIA folks. Are we really doing this again? Not to mention, there's a big difference. The disinformation campaign that the deep state was running in order to try to rig the election were experts asserting something that the average American didn't have any sort of particular insight to where they could disagree. And I'm talking about people that don't follow this stuff, right? So if you're the average American and you hear on the debate stage Joe Biden declare that 51 intelligence agencies folks have said that it's just disinformation, and then that allows, of course, the media, social and otherwise, to block it from occurring. That's different than trotting out some experts to tell you once again that you had it worse economically under Donald Trump and that you have it wonderful under Joe Biden, because it is the world of so-called experts telling us the opposite of what we as citizens live through every day. So this is an even more absurd attempt. But these people trotting out the experts signing letters, I mean, it is almost as if they are intent on discrediting the world of experts. Springfield's Talk 1041, weather in a moment. Now the latest news update. The first alert forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals from Color 10 Fox 49. Meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny 88 for a high today, 69 tonight, 92 tomorrow with a slight chance of showers Saturday afternoon. Otherwise sunny and hot with a high of 94. CNN moderators for tonight's presidential debate have even deeper ties than realized before to former intelligence officials who signed the now debunked letter claiming Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. This according to a Real Clear investigation report yesterday. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper turns out lied about leaking false information to one of the CNN moderators, that being Jake Tapper, about the Trump campaign exchanging information with Russia throughout the election cycle, according to the investigation. Tapper failing to inform the public that the info came from a Clinton campaign-funded dossier, that being the Steele dossier. The now discredited disseminated the information on January 10th, 2017. Clapper denied leaking the information to Tapper during a July 2017 congressional deposition. The House Intelligence Committee said, according to the RCI report, Clapper, quote, flatly denied discussing the dossier compiled by Steele or any other intelligence related to Russia hacking of the 2016 election with journalists. But after further pressure from Congress, the report found Clapper subsequently acknowledged that he did discuss the dossier with CNN journalist Jake Tapper. Clapper apparently lied again to the public the day after the CNN story aired, issuing a statement expressing, quote, profound dismay at the leaks that have been appearing in the press. So here, he's the one leaking the information to Jake Tapper. He lies about it during a deposition. Then after the report that he leaked, or shared with, I don't even know if you'd call it leaking, but he spoon-fed Tapper, he goes out there and he's probably like, I just can't believe this information. It's like Fauci with that report that was dismissive of pointing the finger at China for COVID-19 and the lab and so forth, and Fauci using that report in order to bolster his disinformation campaign regarding China's potential involvement, and then it turns out behind the scenes he was the one that was coordinating the entire report. We've seen this over and over again with the left, particularly when it comes to the Russian conspiracy theories that they put out there behind the scenes. They feed the media the story. Then when the media prints the story, they go out there and they feign shock. I just can't believe what we're learning. Of course, after all of that, CNN hires Clapper as a national security analyst. These people are all so in bed with each other. I mean, this is part of the problem with these institutions any longer, and it has been for some time. The press is supposed to be the watchful eye on the government on behalf of the people, not the other way around. What they have evolved into are institutions that are reporting information or disinformation on behalf of the government and shutting people down who push back against the government. It's the opposite of the way that it was intended to be. They have become the watchful eye of the people on behalf of the government. Tapper, of course, for his part, won an award for his coverage of the story. These people just sitting around in such an incestuous fashion while pretending to be press. You wonder how much content of these outlets like CNN is crafted by government. I mean, clearly the people that are in these positions, the Jake Tappers, the Dana Bashes, and so forth, they are pro-government. Now, they're not pro-all elected officials, obviously. They hate Trump. They hate the elected officials who get in there on behalf of the people, as opposed to on behalf of the government. Those are the people they love. But to what degree do you have these people in the deep state feeding stories to the Jake Tappers, and then those networks hiring those people from the deep state, and then those journalists getting awards for the stories that they put out on behalf of the deep state? And then they all sit around acting like this is just fresh information, and they just, where did this come from? This is news to us. No, it's news from you. And now this absolutely, it's cartoonish and frankly embarrassing. We've gotten to this point. 16 Nobel Prize winners sign letter decrying Trump's economic policies. These people are all Biden donors. One of these signers is Yellen's husband, Treasury Secretary, who is out there as recently as yesterday in an interview saying, oh, there's no sticker shock at the grocery store. We don't have a real problem economically in this country. No. We're really going to regurgitate this Democrat media play in which they get a letter and it's signed by experts telling us how bad Trump is. Oh, okay. If only we could go back in recent history and see if we've ever been through this before. I mean, it's just the Democrats and the media, they have really become lazy. I mean, this is sad. Now, Fox News did do a breakdown, noting Axios omits crucial details about economists who say Trump will destroy the economy. And it's listing all these people and who they're married to, and these are all Democrat activists. These are all the same sort of experts who are wrong all the time. These are the same experts who are telling us that you're wrong when you feel as if you have to spend more money at the grocery store. These are the same experts who tell you, while you're taking on a second part-time job in order to have the exact same standard of living as you did under Trump, that you have it better than you've ever had it. These are the experts. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. Howder Fireworks, your chance to win a $50 gift card to Howder Fireworks, maybe even a $250 grand prize gift card. You could go to ksgf.com and get yourself signed up for that. Also learn about Care to Learn donation drive sponsored by Delta Roofing. So here's some of this laughable attempt by the Democrats to once again have a letter signed by a bunch of experts, by the way, that you've never heard of, that are telling us that Donald Trump will be horrible for the economy. Incidentally, this isn't just a here we go again with the letter of experts, but this is a here we go again on the economy. This is the same stuff that was trotted out when he ran the first time. I recall they were even grabbing folks that were part of the Bush administration. There were even Republican economists mocking Donald Trump and his lack of understanding of the economy. You know, all of these people who have never in their lives had a job in the private sector, telling someone who built a fortune and created countless jobs in the private sector, saying that he doesn't understand the private sector. This is the insane world that has been created. You know who I'd like to see a letter from? 16 small business owners. That's what I'd do if I were the Trump campaign. I'd go out and find 16 business owners and ask them, particularly given that Joe Biden has said he is going to raise taxes, not just on everyone who got a tax cut under the Trump administration, but on corporations, business owners, small business owners in this country. And Elizabeth Warren is encouraging Democrats to hold fast and do not relent on this effort to raise taxes on all Americans. Who are you going to trust? A bunch of left-wing activists that donate the max amount to Democrats that are called experts because they have tenure at some university, or business owners when it comes to business and the economy? In fact, I'd have that in my pocket if I were Donald Trump for this debate tonight, because this is done for the exact same reason of the 51 CIA folks, so that it could be used during the debate. The narratives have been crafted in order to help Biden do what he was able to do 4 years ago in the debate and dismiss the Hunter laptop story as not being real. It's Russian disinformation. Don't trust me. I didn't say it. All these intelligence experts did. The Democrats and CNN understand that people do not trust Biden and the Democrats when it comes to the economy. So, well, look at what I have here. I mean, sure, there's some things that aren't going great right now, but look, I've got a letter of 16 Nobel Prize winning economists who say that it'll be even worse under Donald Trump. Just, forget those Trump years. Just listen to the experts. Let me tell you another one that you can expect to hear tonight, which I have some information on, because even a lot of right-wing conservative media is falling into this trap. This narrative that, when you're hearing it over and over again, and you will hear it tonight, illegal immigrants are 40-some% less likely to commit crimes in this country. By the way, those numbers that they're using it over and over again, that way Joe Biden can use that tonight. Because that is another area. What are the two biggest areas that Joe Biden's vulnerable? The border and the economy. And lo and behold, over the last several days, they have been pounding away at, with the you have this letter from The Economist, but we keep hearing over and over again Democrats dismissing brutal murders and rapes of women and young girls in this country because of Joe Biden's policies as, well, that's less than normal Americans do. Which, by the way, their assertion of that being true is not true. And I'm going to talk about that later as well. We got to get a traffic update. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Wilder RV, all of your RV needs, Clinton, Missouri. It's just 85 miles north on 13. It's a nice drive, in fact. Get a little lakeage. Get some of the rolling hills, the trees. You get some flatland. You get a lot of it. Stop, get some cheese and meat sticks and Osceola on the way up there. And then, of course, the best part, the best place that you can go to learn about RVs or to purchase RVs or an RV, should you already have one, you want to upgrade, or maybe you're a first-timer. And just the constant patterns that you get in life that can sometimes bring you down a little bit because there's nothing new stimulating your brain. It's just the same pattern over and over and over again. And it may not be a bad pattern, but your brain needs something different every once in a while in order for you to feel good, feel fresh. It's emotionally uplifting oftentimes, and living that RV life can do it for you. And that doesn't mean traveling across the country necessarily. For some, it may mean just once a month, or being able to go an hour away and be just away from the normal. And it can be so much less expensive than you may think. Financing available, all the information, including their inventory, at wilderrv.com. Also, KSGF.com. Nick's endorsements. The First Alert Forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. From Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny 88 today, 69 for a low tonight. Mostly sunny, a high near 92 tomorrow. Saturday, a slight chance of showers in the afternoon, sunny and hot with a high of 94. You've got 16 of the world's most notable economists. Most notable. None of which, by the way, are affected by the price of eggs and milk like you are. These are not people who oftentimes even fill up their own gas tank. But they won Nobel Prizes, are warning that former President Donald Trump could stoke inflation if he wins the presidency in November and moves forward with his economic plans. Quote, many Americans concerned about inflation, which has come down remarkably fast. So you know that? Everything's incredible right now. There is rightly a worry that Donald Trump will reignite this inflation with his fiscally irresponsible budgets. All right, so the first thing that we have to do is pretend that we don't remember anything that occurred during the Trump years. And the Biden folks have been out there, of course, lying about inflation, falsely claiming that Biden, when he took office, inflation was at 9% when it was 1.4%. Straight up lie. There's no gray area in that one. There's no, well, according to these inflation numbers, those are the inflation numbers. 1.4%. Biden's been out there falsely claiming it was 9%. Why? Because they have to lie to you. What's funny about this is they are using Biden's economic policies as a reference point to what they fear Donald Trump will do, because they're saying it'll reignite inflation. That this is why we should be. So in other words, they're arguing the reason that you need to keep Biden in office is because Donald Trump's economic policies, in their assessment, will bring us back Biden inflation to its highest level that it was at one point. This is built to give Biden a defense. Mark my words, either he or Jake Tapper or Dana Bash, when talking about the economy, is going to note this. Just like the 51 intelligence agencies. Biden will also probably, and this will be another fun one, the stock market. Let's not forget, when the stock market was at record highs during the Trump years, the mantra was that Trump only cared about Wall Street, not Main Street, despite the fact that the quality of life, economically speaking, was at record highs for Main Street. But that was their mantra. I could still hear Elizabeth Warren screeching about it. The stock market, that's just Wall Street, not Main Street. Those are the same people who are going to be talking about the stock market. Now, the letter signed by the 16 economists, a little background. You've got economist Joseph Stiglitz, the Columbia University professor who reportedly spearheaded the letter, Previously signed a letter supporting Biden's Build Back Better agenda, which has worked out famously for us. Added tremendously to the inflation problem. He's behind the letter that's warning us that Donald Trump's economic policies are going to give us inflation that he supported. He also donated $1,250 to the Biden Victory Fund in 2020. Between 2004 and 2020, he donated over $90,000 to Democrat candidates. Georgetown University professor, these are all people who are the completely unbiased economic folks that signed this letter. George Akerlof, who's married to Biden's Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen. He donated $25,000 to the Biden Victory Fund and maxed out as a donor in 2020, giving the campaign $5,600. Akerlof, who donated nearly $90,000 to Democrats between 1990s and 2022, also signed the letter supporting Build Back Better. Harvard University economist and historian. You know, none of these people have his background small business owner. They all live and breathe elite universities. Harvard University economist, historian Claudia Golden donated $500 to the Biden campaign in 2020, and 2024 has donated over $8,000 to Democrats in recent years. Golden also signed a 2020 letter endorsing the Biden campaign. Economist and mathematician Eric Maskin signed a 2020 letter expressing support for Biden's campaign agenda and donating $3,000 to Democrats in recent years. When reached for comment on his background supporting Biden and Democrats, he said, "Although I'm a registered Democrat and have donated money to Democrat candidates on occasion, I've also voted for many Republicans over the years." Well, I guess we have to take his word for that. See, there's an actual record of dollars donated. What there isn't a record of is what candidates you voted for. He added he considers himself to be more of a centrist than a strong partisan. Oh, how virtuous. Paul Milgram, an economist at Stanford University, also previously signed letters supporting Build Back Better, calling Trump's campaign selfish and reckless. Daniel McFadden, an economics professor at UC Berkeley, donated at least $4,500 to Democrats in 2020. He also signed on to a letter saying Biden's Build Back Better plan would ease inflation. Well, I see why he's an expert. All of these people, we are in decline as a nation, as a culture, as a people, because we just, and I say we as a whole, have lowered our standards. The people that we listen to because we're told to listen to them. These are all people who signed on to economic policies that made things worse. And they specifically, in their endorsements of the Biden policies, cited what they believed would be an outcome, which turned out to be the opposite. Some of these individuals who signed on as experts claimed that the spending of Build Back Better, that all of this was going to make inflation ease. This is what caused it to spike, along with the green energy policies. I mean, the list goes on. These are all people, they're all Democrat activists, they're all Democrat donors who spend more money trying to get Democrats in office than the average person makes in a year. All of this is to give Biden very simple talking points. Part of the plan here is to hand Biden things that he can remember and easily regurgitate, because they recognize that he's not going to be able to get into any sort of deep policy debate or numbers, or that he's not capable of that. So they just give him a letter with 16 economists on it. So that's all he has to repeat over and over again. And then talk about the stock market. That's it. And inflation. Inflation's really low. There's a point that would be great for Trump to make, and it's a point that I think would resonate. I know it would with everyone because it's the reality that we're living in. The economy that these experts talk about is not the economy that you and I live in. It's not. They have developed a grading system for the economy that is not related to our lives and our economy. And we know this because they keep you can almost appreciate their frustration because they don't live the lifestyles that feel the economic impact that we do. I mean, Yellen herself, these people are so tone deaf. You'd think for political purposes, they would at least know what the right answer would be. And she was well, don't you get sticker shock when you go to the grocery store? No. Well, she and her husband are multimillionaires. This is the problem with having people who craft a matrix telling us, whether or not we have a good economy when you have the people doing it that are multimillionaires. Because, they look at this number and that number. Well, no, the economy's good. That's not our economy. Our economy is the price of groceries. Our economy is the price of gas. Our economy is rent that is skyrocketed to the point that many people can't afford it. Our economy is interest rates. Our economy is mortgage payments. Our economy is increased daycare. Our economy is the cost of travel. Our economy, insurance on vehicles and home ownership. That's our economy. That is not the economy that the left is talking about. That's not the economy that the experts are talking about. And in some degree of fairness to them, it's because that's not the economy that affects them. I guess I got to give Yellen some points for at least being honest when she says, no, she's not affected by sticker shock at the grocery store. Unfortunately, the rest of us are. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Well, severe thunderstorms rolled through the listening area yesterday morning, and even though we didn't experience anything too crazy here in the Springfield area, I know that our friends up north had lots of trees down. Now, if you fell victim to that latest storm, I want to recommend Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, whenever you call the Pyramid team, they're going to come out, they'll do that free roof inspection for you, and then they are going to figure out the best solution for you and your home. Sometimes that doesn't mean a whole new new roof, sometimes that means just a simple roof repair, and the Pyramid team, they're going to be upfront and honest with you. They use name brand products, and they even use Ice and Water Shield to help add that extra layer of protection. Now, Ice and Water Shield, that is actually a stick-down product. It helps prevent water in the most common areas that leak. So if it is time to have the Pyramid team out at your house, I recommend that you give Josh and his team a call today. Now, you can find all of that contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
I'm going to, let's see, the next hour. Let me see. Oh, yeah, the next hour, that's going to work just fine. I am going to talk about these statistics that we continue to hear, and this is all creating, again, talking points for Joe Biden tonight. The two areas in which Democrats are viewed as being most harmful to this country, it's the economy, hence the letter of the 16 experts saying that Biden's going to give us a better economy than Donald Trump. And this false, they keep talking about, and you're hearing it more and more, this is not an accident, that illegals are such and such % less likely to commit violent crimes than the average American. But the numbers they're using are not in any way, shape, or form accurate. And I'm going to explain. I want to wait until the next hour just because of sort of timing things out. Right now, though, I wanted to, this is perfect. One of the very few areas that Democrats have decided to try and campaign against Trump is danger to democracy. And we would see these polls that would be done about issues. And when you ask somebody a cold question versus multiple choice, you get much different answers. So whenever you just point blank say, what are the most important issues to you? Then people generally, again, first two, you get the economy, you get border security, and then everything else is single digits under that. But whenever the media says, well, what about danger to democracy? Oh, yeah, no, that's really important to me. Or what about the environment? And people don't want to sound like they're not virtuous. Or so that they'll, when they're prompted with multiple choices, you get different answers. But I always found the media's multiple choice polling of what is important to voters interesting when it came to the context of protecting democracy. Because every time they would report on this, I knew exactly what they were thinking. They were thinking, whenever that number was high, like 46% of people say that that's an important issue to them. In their minds, they're thinking, that's good for Biden. Because in their minds, everyone knows that Donald Trump is a danger to democracy. So people who are concerned about that are going to be Biden supporters. But I thought to myself, I know crap tons of Trump supporters who are worried about, of course, most of them understand that we are a republic, not a democracy form of government on the whole, but they worry about that, our freedoms, and they worry about, quote, democracy in that context. And so I'd long been I've been thinking to myself, I wish that they would get further into that, because I think they're making assumptions here that may not be accurate. Turns out I was right. Just the News has a breakdown. Biden backfire. Washington Post poll, which is a left-wing outlet, says swing state voters trust Trump more on the issue of democracy. So finally, someone decided to get beyond just asking, do you think democracy is important? And then ask the follow-up question, which of these two people do you believe would do a better job of securing democracy? Oopsie daisies, it appears as if Trump is the answer. So even that the Democrats don't have. I mean, January 6th, danger to democracy, that's sort of their fallback. We got nothing else. And apparently, when they are out there pushing that, it is working against them. A majority of swing state voters on Wednesday said that they trust former President Donald Trump more than Joe Biden when it comes to protecting democracy, according to a new poll from the left-leaning Washington Post and the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. A little more than half of respondents told the Washington Post that threats to democracy are extremely important to their vote for president, but 44% said that they think Trump is going to do a better job of handling those threats. Only 33% of respondents said they believe Biden would. 16 said neither. So, other words, double-digit numbers. I love the Democrats out there. They're making an argument without for one moment thinking that perhaps a majority of Americans or a plurality of Americans think that you're the problem on this particular issue. The poll looks at voters in the swing states Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It also divided the respondents into regular swing state voters and, quote, deciders who either voted in only one of the past two presidential elections or between the ages of 18 and 25, been registered to vote since 2022, did not definitely plan to vote. I mean, it just goes breakdown. Justin Guest, a professor of policy and government at George Mason University, told the outlet upon the, I'm sure, very surprising numbers, many Americans don't recognize Biden's custodianship of our democracy, which is a bad sign for his campaign. Yeah, you think? And this is, listen, when you are in charge of a government that is trying to actively put your political opposition in prison, it becomes a little bit difficult to sell the idea that you are the defender of democracy. Going to get a traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. Got a free Veterans Breakfast tomorrow at Scramblers, sponsored by our friends at Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, Serenity Honors, and, of course, Scramblers. And next Monday is the deadline to get signed up to join us as we broadcast live from Costa Mujeres, the Rio Palace luxurious all-inclusive resort. right after the election, the Sunday after, 6 days. It's going to be an incredible time. Memories you will never forget. But you got to get signed up, ksgf.com for all the info. Springfield's Talk 1041. I am Nick Reed, A1 Custom Car Care. Pre-purchase inspection, very valuable, very important, particularly as the Democrats' economic policies, specifically Biden, despite what the economic experts tell us, it's been pretty punishing for us. And so the need to hang on to a vehicle that we already own as long as possible is something that is very significant. Particularly, you look at what it costs for a new car. Some people can afford it. The economic experts clearly can. The left, the elite, they can. But for a lot of us, $500-$600 payments a month, that's huge. And so making sure that your vehicle lasts as long as possible so that you are able to choose when it is that you purchase a new vehicle, it's important. Pre-purchase inspection is very important in that, because then when you do buy a vehicle that's been owned by someone else, then you can make sure that you know exactly what you're buying. I was having a conversation with someone I know last week, and she was talking about selling her mom's car, which was in good condition. Her mother, like a lot of people that are of an older generation, take very good care of their car. They keep up with the routine maintenance and so forth. And I had mentioned, at some point, if you still have it, when the girl child turns a certain age, she's going to need a car. And she relayed to me, she always feels uneasy about selling a pre-owned vehicle to someone she knows. And I said, I get that. And I told her, that's why I take vehicles to A1 Custom Car Care for that pre-purchase inspection. That way, you're off the hook. I know what it is that I'm purchasing. So it's not just for buying from a stranger, from someone you know as well, but service that can be extremely valuable and save you a lot of unnecessary financial heartache. A1 Custom Car Care. I'd mentioned this just beautiful story regarding Washington Post and a survey they did, a poll to find out of those Americans in swing states that are concerned about our democracy and threats to democracy. Who do you support more? And by double digits, it's Donald Trump. Clearly not what Democrats thought was going on in the minds and hearts of Americans as they've been out there talking about they're campaigning on, this campaign's about democracy and saving democracy. You may want to pull back on that a little bit, because the plurality of people that you're preaching that to are thinking, you're not my guy. And they bank it all on January 6th. But when the average American sees you trying to put political opposition in prison, you lose a little bit of your credibility on defending democracy. When you treat your political opposition the same way Vladimir Putin does, puts him in prison, the same way Maduro of Venezuela does, the same way you see in so many of these other totalitarian regimes, you lose a little bit of credibility. It's just the way that it is. You couple that with this story. North Carolina Democrats blocking certification of parties that put RFK Jr., Cornel West on the ballot. Well, the Democrats are actively in North Carolina trying to prevent the people of North Carolina on having options that they don't want them to have at the polling place on Election Day. The DNC is actively paying attorneys now in New York to try and prevent RFK Jr. from being on the ballot. We watched the Democrat Party, and it's not the first primary in which they rigged the system. They moved dates around. They did a lot of funky stuff. It's one of the reasons Tulsi Gabbard went sideways, because as a delegate for Bernie Sanders, at one point, she realized that the Democrats rig the system. They rig the vote. And now we're watching Democrats do everything they can to make sure, particularly in states where they think that they have a chance to win or that it could be close, that the people, the voters who signed forms in order to get people like RFK Jr. or Cornel West on the ballot, that they aren't going to have their candidate of choice. When you do this, it once again makes it difficult for you to claim that you are the great defender of democracy. This from yesterday, the North Carolina Board of Elections denied the certification of 3 new political parties that sought to place Independent presidential contender RFK Jr. and Cornel West on the state ballot. Kennedy and West are attempting long-shot bids for the White House in November and have launched nationwide efforts to appear on the ballot in all 50 states. Kennedy said that he filed enough signatures to qualify on the ballots in 22 states so far, though not all have approved him yet. The Democrat-led election board voted against certifying the three newer parties, We the People, Justice for All, and the Constitution Party. Kennedy would have appeared for We the People, while West would have been the candidate for Justice for All, according to the publication The News and Observer. Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Whatley said in a statement today the Democrat-controlled North Carolina Board of Elections has done President Joe Biden's bidding, willfully ignored North Carolina law, and betrayed the public trust of North Carolinians by voting to not qualify Cornel West or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for the presidential ballot. This is one more example of Democrats fracturing trust in America's democratic institutions and flouting the electoral process in their increasingly desperate attempts to hold on to power. The two Republicans on the North Carolina election board supported certifying the three parties. The reason, of course, this is significant, aside from a sitting president's political party banning competition from the ballot, is because North Carolina is considered a swing state, has a Republican-led legislative branch, but a Democrat executive branch. Former President Donald Trump also won the state in 2016. Biden flipped it in 2020. And what this all boils down to is what I've said for a very long time, and it's the Democrats' realization that RFK Jr. and any of these third-party candidates, Jill Stein as well as Cornel West, do more harm to Biden than Trump. And realistically, it is very, very possible that with them in the race, Donald Trump could win when otherwise Joe Biden might. And while it may not turn out, the numbers may not end up being that way, but they fear that, and they know, and it is a possibility. Stephen Chung, the communication director for Trump's campaign, noting throughout this election, we've seen Democrats try to engage in blatant election interference because they know they've got a flawed candidate. Those who have engaged in these un-American acts must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and receive the harshest punishment possible so these injustices will never be repeated. Well, of course, we know that there are some people who are above the law, and there is one political party that is actively doing everything they can to prevent candidates from being on the ballot that they believe could cause them to lose. So again, the American people see this going on, so it shouldn't be a surprise when the Washington Post polls people who are concerned about threats to democracy as to which individual they believe would do a greater job of protecting America from threats to democracy. By double digits, people say Donald Trump. They can talk about January 6th all they want. But it's the Democrats that are trying to put political opposition in prison, have successfully done so in some particular scenarios, are currently trying to put some journalists in prison who are covering January 6th while not attempting to put others in, and are actively working in states. Well, this, of course, after they try to prevent Trump from being on the ballot. When that doesn't work, let's try to keep RFK Jr. and other third-party candidates off the ballot. There's one party doing all that. So if you are someone who claims that you really are concerned about Donald Trump and not accepting the outcome of elections and delegitimizing elections and being a danger to democracy, but you're supporting the Democrat Party, you're the problem. Newsflash for you. And I suspect that you know it. And quietly you're fine with it, because that's how totalitarians behave. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I am Nick Reed. Look at the weather in a moment. Now, news. First Alert forecast sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny 88 for a high today, 69 tonight, 92 tomorrow. Saturday, slight chance of showers in the afternoon, then sunny and hot with a high of 94. You know the part I can't wait for when it comes to Trump announcing his VP pick?
What?
The media telling us how horrible that they are.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to find out whoever it is. We'll be treated to that. No matter how far back they have to go. Their desperate attempt to paint Mitt Romney as some sort of immoral monster, which it would turn out in certain capacities he was, or is. But it really demonstrated how pathetic they are. They had to go back to, it was like boarding school where he supposedly at the time, I held somebody down and gave him a haircut. You know, the boys will be boy stuff. And like, really, this is where you're going to? I mean, like, okay, all right. Every VP pick is the most brilliant pick and so inspiring when it's the Democrats, when it's a Republican. Just hold on while we tell you how awful this person is. And
Yep, they're horrific.
They're horrific. This horrible individual is a heartbeat away. Who knew that Trump could pick someone that could be even worse than Trump? We'll be treated to all of that. Can you imagine a world? This is how clear it is that the media is immoral in their portrayal of being media when they're not. They're party activists. I don't think there's a single one of you that can ever even imagine the media collectively with a Trump VP pick going, you know what, actually, no, this would be a really great person. Can you imagine that? No, you can't. Because there's no way it would ever happen. The last hour we talked about the two biggest weaknesses for the Democrats, the economy and the border. And with the economy, they have tried to craft Biden's retort in this simplistic response as possible just because of his cognitive disability. And so, lo and behold, you get the 16 experts, the 16 economic experts who say that Biden is much better for the economy than Trump. This is a repeat of Biden being handed his ability to dismiss his son's laptop as Russian disinformation. So it's the exact same thing, and it's done for the same purpose. Although arguably, it's even more important now because Biden is even less capable of stringing together more than one thought in any sort of coherent manner. When it comes to crime and the border, this is another area they're very vulnerable. And you may have noticed you are increasingly hearing Democrats cite statistics claiming that illegal aliens in this country commit crimes at a much lower rate than the average person. So this means we're not supposed to care about women being raped and tortured and murdered by illegals because according to Democrats, they're more likely to have that happen at the hands of somebody who isn't here illegally. So these numbers are also being crafted in order to give the Biden campaign and the Democrats that talking point so that they can try and easily dismiss it. So they can say to a reporter the statistic and then just move on to something else. The problem is the statistics are not accurate. They can't be known as accurate for a number of reasons. One of which is when it comes to sanctuary cities. When sanctuary cities report crimes, those that even bother to, I'm going to get into this here because there's a number of different reasons why, on a federal level in particular, because a lot of the cities don't even report their crimes in a manner that the government is able then to put them together on charts and tables. Some of the biggest ones, New York, for example, being one of them. But the sanctuary cities, when they do report these numbers for a database, guess what they don't do? They do not differentiate between those that are in the country illegally versus those who are legal citizens. Which means, so not only every time you have somebody who's in the country illegally kill someone in a drunk driving accident, not only does that statistic not get labeled as a crime committed by an illegal, it gets falsely attributed to someone who is a legal citizen in this country. John Lott writes about this in the breakdown in the Washington Times, noting that it's no accident that violent crime is near a record 50-year low. That is a quote by President Joe Biden. Recent fact checks at places like PolitiFact rate Mr. Biden's statement as true. Well, of course they do. On ABC's This Week, when Tim Scott, South Carolina Republican, said, "Under Joe Biden, we've seen the greatest increase in violent crime in my lifetime," host Jonathan Karl responded, "Actually, Senator, as you probably know, the latest stats on violent crime and the murder rate show they're actually down this past year." So this is how it all works. Horrific crime. The Biden administration uses false numbers in order to be able to claim that crime is actually better, just like inflation is down, the border's secure, all of that. And then that in turn allows the media to repeat that disinformation every time somebody that's political opposition brings it up. Other so-called fact checkers, such as USA Today, have attacked former President Donald Trump for asserting that violent crime is increasing. Those in the news media, such as ABC's Mr. Karl, rely almost exclusively on FBI data, which, of course, we know is absolutely no political bent to it whatsoever. They rely almost exclusively on FBI data to report on changes in crime rates, but there's strong evidence the FBI data is less reliable than it was even in the past. Now, the U.S. has two different measures of crime. The FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program annually counts the number of crimes reported to the police. The Bureau of Justice Statistics, by contrast, uses its annual National Crime Victimization Survey to ask 240,000 people a year whether they have been victims of crime. The survey, known as the NCVS, is used to estimate total crime, reported and unreported. The survey indicates that only 42% of violent crimes and 32% of property crimes were even reported in 2022, the last year of the NCVS data that's available. So now, here's the reason for the two different approaches, neither of which you can rely on as being accurate. One is the actual reporting by police to the FBI, which what we'll learn here is that not all cities do this. And again, sanctuary cities, when they do, they don't differentiate between illegals and legals. And so the federal government recognizes this. They recognize that not all crime is getting reported. So then they do a survey of people to ask them whether or not they have been a victim of a crime, and they come up with statistics that way. Now, you may note, well, that's not really that accurate either, because, you don't know whether they're telling the truth, or, there's just a number of different factors there. And so this, of course, is the problem. You have two completely imperfect approaches that in no way, shape, or form we can rely on to give an actual accurate assessment of what's going on with crime. Since 2020, the FBI's reported crimes and the NCVS's total crimes have gone in opposite directions. For instance, between 21 and 22, the FBI reported a 2.1% drop in violent crime, but the NCVS showed an alarming increase of 42.4%. The largest one-year percentage increase in violent crime ever reported by the survey. The increase in 2022 over 2020 is slightly greater. Now, is there any political component to this where after Biden gets elected, the FBI's statistics, they start showing a drop? Given what we know about the FBI, I don't think that one can argue that that's an impossibility. In claiming that Joe Biden's claim was correct regarding crime, PolitiFact declared other types of crime statistics, including the National Crime Victimization Survey, show current levels of violent crime far lower than their peaks in the early 1990s. But Biden was saying that violent crime rates were near a 50-year low. Not that it was lower than it was in the 1980s. There have been many years over the last 50 years where the violent crime figures from the NCVS are lower than in 2022. In addition, to say the violent crime rate increased by 42.4% in 2022 seems far from as low as it was in 21 or 20. So in other words, what they're noting here is that you have institutions like PolitiFact that will deliberately dissect the numbers and look at it in time frames that allow them to claim that what Joe Biden is saying is true. Now, we're going to take a break. We've got a traffic update more, and then there's a few more components to this. Because like I said, this is the new disinformation campaign that is being put out there in order to help Joe Biden try and fight back against what people are seeing as the horrific results of his border policies and crime policies, not just border, and they do dovetail. And that is to tell you, just like they did with inflation, prices are fine, they're going down, to tell you that crime is going down when we can see before our very eyes that that's not realistic. Weather in just 90 seconds after the latest traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. First alert forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny 88 for a high today, 69 overnight low tonight. Sunny again tomorrow, 92, and warmer yet Saturday with a slight chance of afternoon showers, high of 94. The media have been attempting to really solidify this talking point of illegals and how they are responsible for a lower number of violent crimes than the average person in this country, or the average citizen in this country. Now, this is done in order to try and help shore up the weakness here, or to shore up strength, rather, against weakness on Biden and Democrats when it comes to the border policies, because we continue to see these horrific examples of rape and torture and murder of women and girls in particular being targeted. And these are individuals that have been released by the Biden administration because of the Biden administration's policies into this country. So there's a direct connection. So they throw out a statistic in order to try and dismiss these deaths as no big deal. The problem is the numbers that they're using cannot, if you really truly care about what's going on with crime in this country, they are irrelevant. And there's a breakdown John Lott has in the Washington Times here where he's noting, first off, there's two different measures of crime that get used. The FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which annually counts the number of crimes that get reported to them by police. And then, because they recognize some cities don't even do this, and different cities have different ways of counting crime, they do a survey of about 250,000 people in order to try and assess unreported crimes. And what they find is that, for example, in between 2021 and 2022, those crimes reported by law enforcement to the FBI showed a drop, according to the FBI, of 2.1%. But when they surveyed people, they found that there was an increase of 42.4%. Now, of course, what the Democrats do is they use the numbers that they can find that make it appear as if everything's wonderful and getting better in this country. And they completely ignore the numbers that show the opposite, which are more in line with anecdotally what we all see as Americans with some of these horrific stories. He notes that it's puzzling enough that the measures of reported and total crimes don't match. But when even these two measures of the same thing, reported crime, are going in opposite directions, there are real concerns about the FBI data. A frequently discussed concern with the FBI data is the decline in the number of police departments that even bother reporting crime. This after a new reporting system was used. In 2022, 31% of police departments nationwide, including Los Angeles and New York, did not report any crime data to the FBI. So you have two of the largest cities in the country that have arguably the highest crime rates in the country that aren't even counted when these statistics are used, along with 31% of police departments in this country. Now, does that sound like the numbers then can be assumed as accurate? They note that this is better than it was in 2021, but still much worse than the 97% of agencies covering most of the U.S. Reported in 2020. In addition, the cities from Baltimore to Nashville, Tennessee, the FBI is undercounting crimes those jurisdictions reported. Still, other problems exist. Police departments downgrading crimes can also explain a drop in FBI numbers. Classifying an aggravated assault as a simple assault means that it will be excluded from FBI violent data crime. The difference often involves whether the criminal used a weapon in committing an assault, but many radically left-leaning prosecutors refuse to include weapons charges against defendants. That can explain the difference between the two measures of reported crimes because the NCVS will ask victims if the assault involved a weapon, even if the police report ignores that characteristic of the crime. And so this makes sense why you see the division between the survey that is done versus what is being reported, because and this is one of the great aggravations that many Americans have, particularly living in blue cities and blue counties, is that these people that commit violent crimes, they get their crimes downgraded to where it's virtually nothing whatsoever. And so somebody that gets assaulted with a deadly weapon, the person who did it may not be charged with use of a deadly weapon. So when that gets reported to the FBI by law enforcement, it is not reported as a violent crime. But when the individual gets surveyed and asked, did they use a weapon? They did, then it does. And so you've got two different standards that are being used here. They note the district attorneys in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, backed by George Soros, are continuing to downgrade felonies to mere misdemeanors. Recent numbers show the progressive Manhattan District Attorney's Office downgraded felonies to lesser charges 60% of the time. With 89% of the time, they were downgraded to misdemeanors. This isn't a new problem. In the past, Chicago has intentionally misclassified homicides, instead labeling them as subject to non-criminal death investigations. The problem may be increasing, and police may be responding to the decisions of prosecutors. Over the last few years, as the number of police officers have been reduced due to budget cuts and retirements, police officers from Charlottesville and Henrico County, Virginia, to Chicago to Olympia, Washington, stopped even responding to non-emergency 911 calls. Instead of police coming out, people can still go to the police station. There is the possibility that people think that calling 911 reports a crime, but a crime is not officially accounted until police make a report. So in other words, you have with these recent changes in the defund the police cities, people who call 911 that police don't even respond to, so it's not counted. Initial estimates cited by some news organizations claim murder rates dropped 13% between 2022 and 2023 and have fallen still further in the first quarter of 2024. Those numbers, however, are still estimates. Murders are usually reported, but these initial estimates may be revised, and the large number of police departments not even bothering to report the data may affect the FBI estimate. But while Joe Biden and the news media point out that the historically large drop in crime last year, they ignore that 2022's projected murder rate was still 5.51 per 100,000 people, or 7% above the 2019 levels. The NCVS doesn't measure murders, which makes up about 1% of violent crimes. News organizations rely on reported crime numbers without considering unreported crimes. The gap between the two reported crime measures provides strong doubts about the accuracy of the FBI's reported crime data. Americans believe that crime is increasing as law enforcement is collapsing. They also note that they report more crimes to police, but that is not showing up in the FBI reports. So aside from, and John Lott, who put this piece together, he's president of Crime Prevention Research Center. Just taking out any potential political motives that you find in George Soros-funded prosecutors' offices. The standards that are used are all over the place and inconsistent. You have a third of police station or police jurisdictions that don't even report the numbers. And then when you take the illegal immigration component in it, and you note that areas of the country that see a disproportionately high number of illegals, Los Angeles and New York, they don't even report their numbers for the purposes of statistics. And sanctuary cities, which, by definition, and the reality of what we've seen, is going to be an area that is, if you are somebody that is a violent criminal and you're in this country illegally, you are in all likelihood going to go to a sanctuary city. There have been individuals that are in the country illegally who have murdered other people, and when asked, why are you here? They said, because it's a sanctuary city. And it makes sense, obviously. You're going to go where you are least likely to suffer any sort of punishment. So when you have a disproportionately high number of individuals that are in the country illegally committing violent crimes, but it's a sanctuary city, when the sanctuary city, if it even does report the statistics, does not differentiate between those in the country legally and illegally. So that means not only does a rape, a child molestation, a murder count as a crime committed by an illegal, it is falsely attributed to somebody who's in the country legally, because that's the way all of the people are treated in the sanctuary city. Part of the advantage that those who are spreading disinformation regarding crime, statistics, and the illegal immigration component in crime, the advantage they have is that this can all become very confusing. And so what they do is they just will take certain numbers, splice this, take that, come up with a statistic that says, 47% of, or, whatever the statistic they're using. You keep hearing them. It's the same one, that illegals are 47% less likely to this or that or so forth. Even if they wanted to genuinely find out the truth about those statistics, there is not a format in which the statistics are gathered in which that can accurately be portrayed on a national level. So even if they wanted to be honest about it, they couldn't. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Refinancing questions? Why would you refinance? You got great interest rates now. Well, just because you refinance to a higher interest rate, that doesn't mean that you are making things more expensive for you. Sometimes that is the case, but other times, particularly if you have other types of debt, I'm not talking about, oh, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy here, but most people have some, some credit card debt. Maybe there's a HELOC situation. Oh, you got a couple years left on a car. Just this standard sort of debt the average American has, that even with a higher interest rate on a refinancing, you could potentially end up with the ability to refinance in a way that you can pay all that other stuff off. And then when you do that, ultimately, because you're paying only one interest rate as opposed to five, you can come out ahead. But how do you find out whether that applies to you? iwantagreathomeloan.com. You just reach out to those folks there. That's where their contact info is, iwantagreathomeloan.com, and they'll get the relevant information, and then they'll let you know, all right, well, here's your particular situation. You may end up finding that you can save yourself a lot of money, not just in monthly payments, but overall. iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. I don't know if I'm going to save this for future. There's just a number of different things we've got. We have Author of the Week coming up, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Jay Ashcroft is also going to join us. Tomorrow's going to be a very, very busy day, but I wanted to note, the news leader has a story. Springfield Tax Commission drafts future 0.75% tax ballot language and weighs the uses. And as I noted when all of this first was portrayed as, well, we're just going to figure out whether or not it's wise to renew this or to try and convince people to renew it, that of course they were going to. It's just patently absurd for the city to pretend as if they really didn't know if this was something that they were going to push for. They were just going to gather people up from the community in order to make that decision. And that's not at all what was done here. What was done is the gathering up of people from the community in order to find out how could we use the money if we get it. And then that's how they market it. The dishonesty here is the portrayal that they were actually going to allow this to sunset, as they promised the voters. Lie. But for maybe some unforeseen circumstance, that this was a predetermined conclusion. I've been telling you this all along the way. The 30-person commission's work has come to an end. After Springfield Mayor McCheese tasked the group with evaluating the future of a 3/4-cent sales tax, the commission has finalized a recommendation on the sales tax and how it may be presented to voters in November, a.k.a. marketed, to get you to vote for it. The 3/4-cent sales tax is currently dedicated solely to funding the city's police and fire pension fund. The closed retirement system is roughly 90% funded, and with the tax bringing in $45 million annually, another 5-year renewal of the tax to support only the pension fund is seen as unnecessary. The tax will sunset at the end of March of 2025, hence why the city has been adamant to put a replacement tax on the November ballot to avoid a lapse in the sales tax that local shoppers would feel. So this is why I am totally opposed to taxes that were told sunset, because it is about as dishonest marketing as you can get. They always present it as, well, it's just going to be for this one thing, see? Oh, it's just going to be for this. And it's going to be over this period of time, and then once it's paid off, it automatically goes away. It's a lie. They never, ever, ever let it automatically go away. They always find some reason they have to have it, even if they have to find a reason that they have to have it. So this Citizen Commission on Community Investment was tasked with weighing whether to bring forth another tax, the amount the tax should be, and when it should sunset, and what it should fund. Well, the group, so again, it's not even like this was a situation where, well, we miscalculated, and we know that the purpose here was for this specific thing, but we were wrong, we don't have enough, so we're asking you to go ahead and renew it in order to fulfill its original obligation. This is a scenario where part of the whole purpose of the commission was figure out where we can spend it. Go find something. We don't know what it is, just go find it. The tax on the ballot language that the CCCI, this is the Citizens Commission on Community Investment, arrived at proposes a 3/4 cent sales tax with a 1/4 cent to support public safety initiatives, including obligations to the pension fund, police and fire pay, and the remaining 1/2 cent to fund, so this is the new stuff they found, comprehensive plan capital and parks projects, thank goodness for that, and neighborhood and community initiatives, which is basically a broad, if you want to, I don't know if you want to call it a slush fund, but they could just come up with whatever they want down the road and label it as a community initiative, because you can put anything under community initiative. The first public safety portion would have no sunset, while the 1/2 cent would expire after 10 years. Again, laughable joke. If it were approved, though the two will be presented as one question. This also should not be allowed in any sort of ethical question presented to the people by way of a vote, and that is having a tax that we're told will expire while another one will sunset, because if you are fundamentally opposed to one form or the other, or maybe some people are okay with one that is going to sunset but not the one that's permanent, you are forcing them to either vote for both of these or against both of these. There's part of it, and there's more to this. We'll talk about it in the future, but I thought this was so transparently refreshing. During Tuesday's last CCCI meeting, questions arose about adding a note that the tax would not increase the total sales tax and the fact that the 1/4 cent of it would not sunset. So in other words, they're like, okay, at least part of this, we're going to, like, we got to let people know that some of this isn't going to sunset, that this is a permanent tax. But City Attorney Jordan Paul was hesitant to add the language into the ballot question and instead advised to include that information during the education campaign ahead of the election, which means whenever they wanted to tell you about it. Quote, "This is a relatively conservative jurisdiction. You've got people that are interested in challenging taxes." So what there's an acknowledgement here, which again, I guess you got to give some credit, that he is advising they hide on the ballot when people actually go to vote the fact that the tax will not sunset because he's afraid it won't pass. So they're actively discussing, and the city attorney here, according to the quote in the paper here, to mislead people by omission on the tax question because he knows that by being fully transparent, it decreases the chances that they're going to get your money. I mean, these people, no shame, no ethics. Springfield, Missouri, everyone. All right, KSGF.com, your chance to win fireworks from Howder Fireworks. News in 60 seconds. We've got Author of the Week coming up, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Nearly half of American electric vehicle owners want to switch back to a gas-powered vehicle, according to McKinsey data. McKinsey and Company's Mobility Consumer Polls for 2024 released this month found that 46% of EV owners in the U.S. said that they were very likely to switch back to owning a gas-powered vehicle in their next purchase. So this, of course, is completely contrary to what we hear from people like Pete Buttigieg and others who are falsely they're portraying electric vehicles as something that just naturally people want, and the free market system is at play here, when it could not be further from the truth. This is not a free market system. If you have a free market system, you don't have to have governors of states like California push for laws that make it illegal to buy any sort of vehicle other than an electric vehicle after a certain year. But we've been told that people more and more are very excited and wanting electric vehicles. The only reason that more people don't have electric vehicles is because the manufacturers just can't produce them fast enough. Well, it turns out that according to the survey, half the people who have bought into them are saying, no, I want to go back. Apparently not expanding the interest in electric vehicles, but it's contracting. Now, there, of course, are going to be a lot of people. We've talked about this issue before. Electric vehicles, I think for some people and the way that they drive around, how it is that they're going to use it, probably is just as convenient as a gas-powered vehicle. In fact, it could be more convenient. They drive it 10 miles a day, and that's it. They don't need it for any more than that. And they can leave it plugged in at night. And, they never have to stop at a gas station. And they only need to recharge it at night when they're home anyhow. And so it's perhaps even more convenient for them. The problem is they continue to try and mislead people into believing that it's just as convenient as anything else. In fact, there was a news letter to the editor that was written by somebody, the things I've learned owning an electric vehicle, and it was just all how wonderful it was. One of the things that was funny, though, is how convenient it actually is to charge it, because all you have to do is wait until this time of the night, and you can charge here. And they were like, that's not convenient. Convenience is you are within half a mile of being able to completely fill it up in 90 seconds. That's convenient. But point being is there's been this attempt to convince people that these vehicles are just as convenient and reliable and in the same ways as gas-powered vehicles, and that's just not true. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise that you have such a high percentage of individuals that are saying, I want to get rid of this and I'm going to go back to a gas-powered vehicle, because I'm sure those are individuals who utilize a vehicle for transportation purposes that are not conducive to the limitations of an electric vehicle. And this is what happens when you mislead people, when you falsely advertise something as not being limited in the capacity it is in certain ways, and then they buy it and they try to go on these long trips, or they live in a part of the country where they have to run the heater all the time, and all of a sudden they're finding that it isn't the way that it was sold to them. And this is why government-run industries does not work, because it is in total defiance of consumer first. Free market system is all about what does the consumer want, how do we adjust to achieve it. Government-run system is we're going to tell you what you want, and if you don't want it, we're going to change the law to force you to do it anyway. Two different approaches. One has been wildly successful, and the other has proven time and time and time again to be a tremendous failure. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Latest news. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. From Color 10 Fox 49, meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny with a high today of 88. Low of 69 tonight. Mostly sunny, 92 tomorrow. Saturday, slight chance of showers in the afternoon. Then sunny and hot with a high of 94. Talk 1041, I am Nick Reed. It's Thursday, which means it is time for Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Andre Archie, PhD, Associate Professor of Ancient Greek Philosophy at Colorado State University. Academic works published in everything from the Journal of Philosophical Research, Ancient Philosophy. He also writes essays for National Review, American Conservative, Modern Age, and his book, The Virtue of Colorblindness. I thank you for being with us this morning. I grew up in, I'd say, the 80s, early 90s. I was born in 77. And, of course, when you are a child, your perceptions are much different than when you're an adult. But it seemed as if when I grew up, any real talk of racism in America was mostly of the past. And I know growing up, although I was in a predominantly white area, we didn't think anything of our friends that were of color. That stuff just really didn't matter to us. And color blindness had essentially been what we thought was achieved for the culture overall. And we've gotten to this point now where we're told that is a bad thing, and color blindness is racism now. The entire world seems upside down when it comes to this context. And I'd like for you, if you would, start off and we think of color blindness in sort of a stereotypical, well, I don't see color, but how do you define it for the purposes of your book?
Yeah, Nick, thanks for having me on. I think this is an important topic. So what I do in the book, The Virtue of Colorblindness, of course, it's ridiculous to say that we don't see a person's color or their ethnicity. I mean, if it's obvious, if they're a visible minority, let's say, if they're African American, a person of color, of course we see that. If they're a white American, of course we see that. What I'm arguing against is the idea that we put some sort of moral value on a person's color. And so that's what we've gotten to the point of doing. We say that people of color, black people in particular, are victims and white people are victimizers. And so we're doing exactly what our history tells us not to do. We're sort of going back to the days of Plessy versus Ferguson. So I think it's absurd for those like Kendi, Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. I think it's absurd for them to argue, well, the only way to surmount racism is to practice racism by actually seeing people's color and then putting a value on that color. I think it's just the opposite. And I think, in fact, we're going backwards in a lot of areas in American society.
A lot of folks that I know in the conversations we have, they view individuals like those that you've listed and those that push anti-color blindness and CRT and DEI as individuals that they knowingly are using it as a tool to divide for the purposes of power. Do you see it that way, or I think it's just hard for what I would call normal people to believe that people actually believe this line of thinking?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, I think that the people that are listening to us, our conversation, it's all very intuitive. It's normal that we would be arguing against these ideas. And so I do think there are a group of people who, first of all, they're anti-American. They radically want to reorganize society, especially the family, especially education, and that's where they've gotten a foothold. But I do think there's a group of people who, in fact, do not like America and what it stands for. And then I think there's another group of people who are just ignorant. They don't realize that anti-racism is not fighting racism. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's causing more racism and antagonism and resentment. And then there's a third group. They, in fact, are in it for power. And I think that's the sort of predominant group. And I think they've wiggled their way into key institutions in our society, and they've created havoc. And so I do think that there's ulterior motives for that main group who are simply in it for power. And it's unfortunate because many good-hearted people don't see what their motives are. And so I think this book, I think your show, I think we're trying to expose exactly what this supposed idea of anti-racism is. It's racism.
We oftentimes hear from the left in this context about, quote, difficult conversations. I find that generally they don't want difficult conversations. They want people simply to agree with them. And if my understanding is correct, you have somewhat of an interesting take on here that the attack on colorblindness doesn't really even deserve the level of respectful hearing that it does get in today's day and age.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I mean, I think that, I mentioned a philosopher by the name of John Stuart Mill. Basically, he argues in his book on liberty that ideas, truth, good ideas sort of bubble up to the top. They sort of win in the marketplace of ideas. And I don't think that's always the case. And we find that with anti-racism and wokeism and DEI. I mean, that pretty much predominates now in the public square. And so why is that? I try to pinpoint some of the history as to why that came about. But many conservatives, many good-hearted people who think about these issues just took it for granted that diversity, it's good, it's for the sake of trying to correct the past. But in fact, diversity in its malicious form, or let's say multiculturalism, to be more accurate, it was all about the politics of recognition, wanting groups to be recognized, and arguing that all cultures are equal when we know that all cultures aren't equal. So I think that there's a misconception about how to fight racism. And I think that the majority of Americans are not racist. America is not systemically racist. But again, you have a group of people who are just bent on exploiting the history of race that we've dealt with as a country for the sake of power. So I do think that we have to stand up. Normal people have to stand up and fight and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not the way to talk about the past. We've made a lot of progress as a country. And if we look at our founding principles, I think that's the way for us to get back on track, because we can trace the idea of colorblindness from Frederick Douglass all the way back to the Western philosophical tradition, and of course, the modern civil rights movement. And I think the majority of Americans still believe in those founding principles, but we have a powerful group of individuals that want to take us back.
We are talking with Andre Archie, author of The Virtue of Colorblindness. What advice do you have of people that feel they get shut down if they do try to engage in a conversation because they're white, told that the fact that they're white means they're privileged, and the fact that There's almost this impossible scenario that gets created where the fact that you think that you're not racist just proves that you're racist, and how to counter that, or for maybe some well-intended white people who feel it's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost as if you're damned if you do, you're
Right.
damned if you don't. If you speak up, you're going to be labeled as a racist. If you don't speak up, or yeah, I mean, you're right. It's absolutely difficult, and I try to address that in a chapter from the book called "Comfortable Racism," and that's essentially when middle class people just simply get exhausted with the issue of race. So it's middle class exhaustion coupled with the concept of anti-racism, and so what they end up doing is throwing their hands up. Many Americans end up throwing their hands up, saying, "Okay, at least if we hear from Kendi, Ibram X. Kendi, our children will learn something about the past." And I say, no, do not fall into that temptation. The simple answer is we have to be courageous. I mean, I can't force people to speak up. I can't force people to do what's right, say what's right. But I think if we sort of look into our own hearts and we hear things, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to say something. That's the only way to push back against this modern day racism. So I would say, around the dinner table with our neighbors, with our community, we have to speak up. In our hearts, we know we're not racist. And so we have to rely on that belief. We know ourselves, but we have to speak up because it's for the greater good. So I would say it's a very simple prescription. I would say we have to be courageous. A lot of white Americans have to be courageous and say, wait a minute, I know what it is to be colorblind. It's not racism. It means to look past a person's color, right? Don't assign any moral merit to their color and look at them as individuals, their character. I think that's the only way forward. So I would say try to be as courageous as possible and speak up at home, our churches, synagogues, etc.
We, or white people, I should say, generally when the subject matter comes up in modern day, it is a white person that is the subject of attack, the accused of being privileged. And so we see in the anti-color blindness world that white people are, oftentimes they feel as if they are the victim in it. But those that we're told are being lifted up by this, they too are victims, correct?
So you mean those who are being lifted up?
That we're told that this is supposed to equalize things, like the African-American community or the Hispanic community, and it's being presented as, oh, this is good and positive for those groups of individuals, but in fact, oftentimes it's just as damaging to them as well.
Oh, exactly, because, I mean, what you're doing is you're robbing them. When you tell a young African-American person that the system is rigged against them, that America is systemically racist, you're really stifling, crippling their agency, right? You're hampering them as an individual. They're unable to flourish with that mentality, and we see the result of that. In fact, by focusing on that, we fail to focus on the real problem, which is the African American family. The fact that we have 70% of African American children born into single parent families, and why that's so significant is because those children end up being susceptible to these ideologies. And so I have a chapter in the book called Okaphobia. It means fear. It's a concept that I flesh out a bit. But basically, if you have young people who don't have a grounding in family, they become receptive to these racial ideologies, to affinity groups, etc. So teaching our young African Americans in particular that America is systemically racist takes away their motives, their incentives to better themselves, and it does a lot of damage. And so I think we need to start there as a country in terms of trying to figure out how we can move past these racial ideologies that predominate in the public square. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's victims on both sides if we continue to go down this path, and we can see that particularly with young African Americans.
Well, I'm curious how you ended up how you are, given that you're a black American, and just politically speaking, you seem out of line there, and perhaps even more interesting, you are a professor on a university campus in America, 2024. These both scream you should be a left-wing ideologue.
Right.
So how is it that Andre Archie is Andre Archie?
Yes, yes. So I mean, as most people, it's sort of a complex,
Mm-hmm.
how people get where they get. But I was raised, my parents divorced when I was young. In fact, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and we ended up moving after a year to Denver. And so we had some hard times. I mean, I was with my mom. My mom ended up getting remarried, but in divorced families, I mean, resources are divided. And so we had some tough times. And I get into some of this in the book, in the chapter on potatoes. But I would say that through all of that, we were pretty religious. We went to church every Sunday. Strong grandfather. He was pretty stable. I had sisters who were very supportive. I was the youngest. And so I had some guardrails, if you will. And I think Denver is fairly, as a young child coming up in the 80s. I mean, it wasn't as harsh as you would find in other places as a working class kid. So there were some factors there that helped me tremendously. And so that's why I'm able to speak to the essential role that the family plays in the flourishing of the young, because I've experienced some of that, and I was lucky. So that accounts for at least my positive attitude. My family was positive. It was about upward mobility.
Right.
In terms of being a professor, I've always been rather academic. I found that to be my lane, my path, and I enjoy ideas and engaging in that sort of work. And the environment I'm in now is fairly supportive. I mean, it's intellectually diverse, my department. I don't talk politics with my colleagues for the most part. They think I'm crazy, but that's fine. That's fine. But it's an environment that I like. Unfortunately, some of the trends that are taking place, I find it on my campus, but, I'm trying to put up the good fight with the book, and so far the reception's been positive. So that's a little bit about myself in terms of my ideas and my background.
Andre Archie, PhD, author of The Virtue of Colorblindness. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your book with us this morning.
Sure, Nick. This has been fun. I appreciate the invite.
Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed.
Let me put you on hold really quick, and I will get you over to Nick, okay?
All right, we got a traffic update that we are going to speak with Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. Don't forget, KSGF.com, your chance to win free fireworks from Howder Fireworks, Ultimate 4th of July. And while you're there, you can learn about Care to Learn donation drive sponsored by A1 Custom Car Care. Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed. First Alert Forecast, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements from Color 10 Fox 49 meteorologist Tom Schmidt. Sunny day, high of 88, low of 69 tonight, mostly sunny 92 tomorrow, and then Saturday a slight chance of showers in the afternoon, otherwise sunny, hot, high of 94. We do have a Veterans Breakfast tomorrow if you come out as we broadcast live Friday Roadshow. At Scramblers, you're going to get free breakfast if you are a veteran 6A to 9A. That thanks to Serenity Honors, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, Delta Roofing, and, of course, Scramblers. And we've got elections underway, primaries underway, and, of course, when it comes to all things election, Secretary of State position is pretty important. Secretary of State Ashcroft is with us this morning and wanted to just utilize your presence to answer any questions that people may have regarding what do I need to do to vote. Of course, there's those of us that like to do it the good old-fashioned way where you go and you show up on voting day and then you vote, and it's that simple. But, of course, there have been a number of expansions, early voting being one of them. And while Missouri is much more safe and secure than a lot of other states, there still is the availability to vote in a number of different capacities. So what is it that people need to know when it comes to the upcoming election?
Thing that people should know is that if they are not going to be at the polling place on election day, but they're otherwise eligible to vote. I had someone ask me about a family member that was deployed just today. They can have requested their absentee ballot, and that ballot will be sent out to them. Absentee ballots started getting sent out to individuals like that on Tuesday. For people that are not going to be in the jurisdiction on election day but can be in the jurisdiction beforehand, there is 6 weeks of in-person absentee balloting that has started. That is the most secure way to vote if you're not going to be able to be at your polling place on election day. If you're a poll worker, if you're a military individual that Uncle Sam sends, if you're over-road trucker not going to be there, want to encourage people to do that. You will need your government-issued photo ID because Missouri finally implemented that in November of 2022. If you do just want to vote early, but you don't have an excuse, you will have to wait till the 2 weeks before the election. You will have to do it in person. You will be required to have that government-issued photo ID, and there will not be any provisional ballots. That's just part of the security measures. If you're not registered to vote, you have to register to vote by July 10th. If you have trouble, please reach out to our office. If you want to check if your ID is valid, reach out to our office. Whatever we can do to help, we want the people of this state to make the decision.
I know one of the things, in fact, I saw there was election info that is being sent out by your office, and it talks about ballot measures and you encouraging everyone to familiarize themselves with the ballot issues before going to the polls. And what is the best way for people to do that? Because people often, they'll see the ballots and there's like, man, this is really long, and that's just sort of the short version of it. What is your office's recommendation in terms of the best way to get informed on those issues?
If you get to the polling place and haven't read through those issues, they will be posted in their entirety at the polling place. You may see a poster that almost looks like a bed sheet with small writing. That will have every word of those issues. But it's much better if people look at that beforehand. They can go to the Secretary of State's website, sos.mo.gov. The full verbiage, language of every issue that will be, every statewide issue that will be on the ballot is posted there under elections. They can read that. They can print it out from the website. They can mark it up, and then they can do their own research to make sure that they are self-informed and make a good decision for the people of Missouri.
We're talking with Secretary of State Ashcroft. There are a lot of folks that are obviously very concerned when it comes to election integrity and worry about potential shenanigans occurring at ballot places. And so they hear poll watchers, a term quite often used. Explain that role in Missouri, and if people do want to participate, how to do that, because I think sometimes people assume when they hear people talk about being poll watcher, that means just show up and film people, and it's sort of I don't want to use the term vigilante, but it's not really connected to the process. So will you explain that?
Yeah, and anyone that has concerns, I want to invite them not only to consider being a poll watcher, but a poll challenger or a poll worker. Poll watchers, along with poll challengers and poll watchers, they are kind of the last line of defense. Poll watchers are allowed to be behind the curtain. They're allowed to oversee the process. They don't get involved with what's happening, but they can take notes. If they see something that they believe is incorrect, they can step out of the poll and call someone about them. It's just one more way to make sure that things are going correctly, that the rules are being followed, and that the people of this state can trust our elections. And anybody that's willing to do poll watcher, poll challenger, or a poll worker, reach out to your local party central committee, Republican County Central Committee, Democrat County Central Committee, Libertarian County Central Committee, and they can forward your name, and you will be one of those three positions, and you will help make sure that Missouri's elections stay world-class.
Secretary of State Ashcroft, and then finally, I know this isn't why you are with us this morning, but on the political campaign front, I saw you got Vivek Ramaswamy throwing his support behind you.
Yeah, that was really encouraging to have someone that truly understands the dangers of the swamp, that understands the dangers of the woke agenda, to look at this race, to look at the other people running, and to be willing to publicly say, Jay Ashcroft is the man we need to move Missouri forward, to drain the swamp, and put the people first in Missouri.
Jay Ashcroft, as always, appreciate you hearing from us, and I'm sure a number of occasions prior to the election, both in your capacity as Secretary of State and as a candidate for governor, we'll be hearing more from you. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
All right, you bet. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. And we do have absentee ballots up at ksgf.com. I should mention that. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Whether you're wanting to purchase your first ever firearm, or maybe you're an avid firearm collector who wants to stock up on on potential ammo, because we might have that ammo shortage as we get closer to 2025, Quick Draw Gun in Monette is the place to go. And right now it is a great time to take a trip down there because their annual summer sale is still going on. The summer sale runs through July 4th. Most guns are currently on sale. They also have doorbuster deals that you won't want to miss, and it is a great shop if you haven't been down there. They have hundreds of accessories to choose from and names that you will not find anywhere else in Southwest Missouri. And before you go, if you are out there and you're looking for a specific firearm or accessory, or maybe you just have questions, you can go ahead and give Brad and his team a call today. Now you can find all of that contact information for Quick Draw Gun in Monette, plus the shop hours, the store address, all of that is going to be housed under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Yesterday, the Supreme Court handed down an opinion regarding the Biden administration's censorship of free speech in this country, essentially just punting it. This is, by a number of people, seen as just almost the end of free speech, because not only did it, in the assessment of many scholars, give an okay to government censoring free speech, but almost more than that. I mean, just like permission, saying, yeah, knock yourself out. There are many that are beginning to view the court as being political in an effort to not be political, that there are three in particular that consistently show themselves as cowards, that anytime there is any sort of potential backlash by Democrats in this country, that they will essentially try to avoid coming down with any hard ruling, which sometimes results in consequences, but not their consequences, that they want their hands off. John Roberts was really seen as displaying this sort of behavior when it came to Obamacare and what was believed to be a switch in his position on that. And we've seen it in a number of different cases, though not all. And then there's which it's a totally misunderstood thing dealing with emergency abortions in Idaho, in which the appeals court is already taking that up. This isn't in Idaho, and they were filing. There was a disagreement. The Biden administration saying that essentially hospitals, if it's deemed to be necessary, have to perform abortions, and so this was in the courts, and an appeals court was taking it up. But the Supreme Court had evidently decided, well, even though the appeals court has not yet decided this, we will take a look at it. But their finding, posted early, apparently, was that, well, we've decided not to look at it early anyhow, which Alito noted, this is absurd. Why did we agree to take this up, but now saying we're not going to? But that aside, what is with, I mean, for all the talk from the left that this court is delegitimate or not legitimate because of their findings, they really, this, particularly when it comes to abortion, the inability to keep this stuff from being posted, from being released, and now you've got this second one where somebody accidentally posted it ahead of time. I mean, get it together, folks. That being said, I wanted to share with you what I think could best be described as a sobering assessment of the current Supreme Court. And John Daniel Davidson, whom I actually read a piece earlier this week, he's had a couple of really great pieces this week, has one titled, "The Supreme Court is Not Going to Save You." Now, I'm going to read this to you, and it's not necessarily uplifting or encouraging, but it is what he presents, and I think arguably accurate, an accurate assessment of the place the Supreme Court has made for itself in this country. He notes that the Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling in Murphy v. Missouri dropped Wednesday, shattering the hopes of conservatives that maybe, just maybe, the judicial branch would stand up for the First Amendment rights of ordinary Americans against the egregious abuses of the executive bureaucracy. But no, the court instead ruled that the plaintiffs lacked standing because the Biden White House allegedly backed off of its censorship campaign after the 2022 midterms, which it actually didn't. The ruling essentially allows the federal government to continue trampling on the First Amendment rights of ordinary Americans by deputizing social media companies to do what federal agencies cannot do directly, and that is police what Americans are allowed to say online. Now, of course, we know it's not Americans, it's Republicans, conservatives, because it is the Democrat Party that has been defending the right to take away your First Amendment. He notes, if the result shocks you, if you're surprised and outraged that the Supreme Court, which you thought was dominated by a solid conservative majority, you shouldn't be. If you thought the supposedly conservative majority on the court was going to check the worst impulses of the executive branch and restore the constitutional rights of Americans, you shouldn't be shocked at that either. If you reposed your hope for the survival of the American Republic and 5 or 6 black-robed justices who would stand athwart the tyranny of the administrative state and the collapse of our political institutions, you can say goodbye to all that. The Supreme Court is not going to save America. And just to be clear, neither is Donald Trump. In fact, the court's ruling makes it all the more likely that Trump won't even get the chance because it gives the Biden administration a green light to ramp up a speech suppression campaign ahead of the November election through censorship by surrogate, in the memorable phrase of constitutional law attorney Jonathan Turley. But whatever happens in November, the court's failure to protect the free speech rights of Americans against censorship by the government should be a wake-up call for all of us. Our institutions are rotten. They do not function as intended, and we cannot rely on them to protect us or maintain our constitutional system of government. This is true of the Supreme Court as it is of Congress and the executive branch. The latter, for example, is totally beyond the control of the elected president, whomever it might be. Recall that the online censorship of Americans didn't begin under President Biden, it began under Trump. From the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020 until Trump left office in early 21, if you criticized the CDC or cast aspirations on the efficacy and safety of the forthcoming vaccine, you would very likely be targeted for censorship. Same thing if you suggested that ballot harvesting and absentee voting were unsecure ahead of the 2020 election. Most notoriously, thanks to the Twitter files, we know that just before the 2020 election, the U.S. intelligence community coordinated closely with Twitter and Facebook to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story in what amounts to the biggest case of election interference in American history, I would note that we know of. All this happened under Trump, who was unable to control the rampant collusion between the national security establishment and big tech. As for Congress, a GOP majority can't be bothered even to negotiate with Democrats to secure our southern border, and routinely fails to use any leverage it has to do the things Republican voters want done, can't be relied on to check the abuses of the executive bureaucracy. Of course, Congress is supposed to have oversight of these agencies, which is a complete joke. If a Republican-controlled Congress was ever going to do any real oversight, it would have already defunded and disbanded the FBI. Instead, it recently approved funding for an expensive new FBI headquarters. I guess all of those government censors need more office space. The point here is that we need to get our heads out of the sand and open our eyes to the reality of the situation. Conservatives have long vested their hopes for America's future in an originalist majority on the Supreme Court. This was one of the talking points in favor of voting for Trump over Clinton in 2016 amid voters who disliked Trump. Hold your nose and vote for the bad orange man because he'll be able to appoint a bunch of justices. If Clinton wins, the Constitution will be destroyed by a liberal Supreme Court majority. There is a certain logic to this, and indeed something to be said for voting in a way that increases the likelihood of at least some conservative sway over the institution. Certainly Roe v. Wade would never have been overturned without the 3 justices appointed by Trump. That was an historic achievement, and there's no gainsaying it. But as Wednesday's ruling in Murphy v. Missouri shows, no Supreme Court majority is going to save America and rescue the Constitution. That's only going to happen, if it happens at all, through a second American Revolution and the refounding of the country. As I've argued before, we need to stop calling ourselves conservatives because there's nothing left to conserve. One of the things that means is letting go of the idea that a majority of originalist Supreme Court justices is going to swoop in and undo all tyrannical mechanisms that a century of administrative bureaucracy has built up for the purpose of undermining and destroying our system of government. That's simply not going to happen. Continuing to wish for it and expect it is a fool's errand. And if we want to be prepared for what's coming, we need to be realistic about that. Now, as I noted, it's not uplifting or encouraging, but instead a call to be realistic about where we are in this country today. And that is, if we have a Supreme Court that will not even rule in favor of protecting the First Amendment rights and instead say that states and the people within states have no standing to fight against a government that suppresses our free speech, then we might as well forget about it and at least be realistic about where we are at this point in time in our history. And from a political standpoint, again, I would note, this is all brought to you by the Democrat Party, the party that we're told is needed to save the Constitution, all while doing everything they can to destroy it. KSGF.com. Learn about Care to Learn donation drive sponsored by IHOP. Also, that is your gateway to joining us as we broadcast live from Costa Mujeres after the election. We will be at the beautiful, all-inclusive Rio Palace, and we'll be broadcasting there from a few days. So many of you will be joining us. It's just over $1,800. That includes airfare. We're all together. We all go together. Have a great time together, though you don't have to spend time with everyone. There's always a few that like to do their own thing, and that's perfectly fine, but we're there when you need us. And it's just a wonderful time. And for the pricing to cover the junior suites and the airfare and the taxes and the food and the alcohol and everything for just $1,800, a little over per person, it's just an incredible deal on top of everything else. The deadline is July 1st, so you must get signed up quickly if you want to join us. There is a website that sells it's a clothing label, and they do a lot of swimsuits, men and women, called Divino Seas. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Divino Seas? I'd never heard of it either. But they're in the news now because they are getting a bit of backlash on social media from people because they have, among other things, highlighted a bikini made in honor of Rosa Parks. Now, they're being hit at for being largely disrespectful. Like, what? And I don't think that people who see this as disrespectful to Rosa Parks are necessarily way off base. If she were alive today to give her thoughts on this, she is alive, right? No, she's dead, right? Didn't she die? She's dead. Rosa Parks is dead, right? I think
yes.
she is. I'm just making that assumption, and then I thought to myself, well, what if she's not?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
She died in 2005.
Okay, all right. Who knows what she would think? I don't know. While a lot of apparent supporters of Rosa Parks and her play in the civil rights era seem to be offended by this. That's how they're expressing it. This is disrespectful to her to sort of reduce her down to a bikini. And I mean, I don't know how it is that you design a bikini with her in mind is just sort of a weird thing. And she's not the only one incident. Beauties like Eleanor Roosevelt evidently have a bikini inspired, as well as a bunch of other people that I've never even heard of. And they may say, hey, this is great. This is how far we've advanced. To me, though, I wouldn't say offensive. The component of this that is eye-rolling is just it's the pandering. There was a book that was written years ago called Start With Why, and I'm sure those of you in marketing and self-improvement, you may have read the book, and it was I always forget the last name of the author, but he actually did a TED Talk on it, and then it became so popular it would expand into a book, and talking about how the real popular companies out there and marketing are cause-driven instead of product-driven. And it not just for company profits. Martin Luther King Jr. was used as an example, and the I Have a Dream. It was about the cause of the dream, all the way to Apple and iPhones and how it was all about the cause of the user, and just what a real benefit and success that those sort of ad campaigns would have. And it was your why for doing it. The problem is, I think that has been so just panderingly overused to where you have all of these different companies that we've got to attach ourselves to something virtuous, no matter how absurd and potentially inappropriate it is. And it's just gotten to the point where it's like, are you kidding? Really? A bikini honoring Rosa Parks.
I mean, companies really do need to stick to what they do.
Yeah. It's just tiresome at this point. See you at Scramblers tomorrow. I'm Nick Reed.